Steve. You may have seen him yesterday, and he's awesome. And so this is like his table. I'm gonna have to give him credit. I mean, I don't know where he got it, or it's great. Yeah, and it's a beautiful, and the space is
And it's huge. So I went to just kind of walking around so it opens up back there.
It does. Oh my gosh, there's so many people in this building that I don't even realize. I mean, I know like right next door, okay, but
well, I hear the dings going off. I'm like, more people coming in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, or deliveries. Yeah.
I'd like to welcome everybody back to Alabama Care. Today we have Mrs. Ashley Rhea, the founder of Rhea Law LLC, and we're going to be talking about advocating for individuals facing discrimination in the workplace and in the school environments. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over. Mrs. Rhea, if you would introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Ashley Rhea. I'm an attorney. As stated, I specialize in employment law and disability discrimination in school as well. So I also, just for disclosure, I have my own physical limitations. I have arthrogryposis. I just throw that out there because it's a unique and disease that others that have it, they love when they hear that. They're like, oh my gosh, me too. So, but I own Rhea Law LLC. Started it about 3 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Time flies. So I'm just really excited to be talking to you today.
Yeah, we appreciate you giving us the time this morning. And I always like to ask, are you originally from Alabama?
I am. So I am from Birmingham. I grew up here. I went to Cobb Heights Elementary School in the Birmingham area, and then Vestavia High School. So.
And I feel like it was one of the first questions that I was asked when I moved to Alabama is who do you root for in the college football?
Oh my gosh, okay, all right. So I am an Alabama fan. I went to Birmingham Southern College for my undergrad, so I don't even necessarily have a claim, but my family member, my grandfather was really into Alabama football. So I know you have to take a side.
Yeah, you
and if you
do.
don't, and people are just thinking, what's wrong with you?
My youngest brother played for South Alabama, so I kind of get away with it by saying go Jags.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Kind of walk the line there, but I feel like on the big day, you got to pick your team.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
So Rhea Law started about 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. Did you always know that you wanted to be an attorney growing up and that you wanted to have your own practice?
So I'm actually the first attorney in my family, so which is interesting and neat. So I did not know that I wanted to be an attorney growing up. I've always been a people person, and I've always enjoyed service, I guess, in general. And going into college at Birmingham Southern, I really thought I would do something more maybe public policy, like working in the government, maybe being some kind of, lobbyist is a bad word, but for a good cause, for disability rights, for instance. And then in college, I had a course that really kind of helped change my direction, and where it was based in some legal history of the Constitution, basically. And so that steered me towards wanting to go to law school in general. And then in law school, I really just took a class that was discrimination law. It was specifically employment discrimination, and it just really resonated with me. I loved it so much. I was a nerd about it. I just enjoyed reading the cases. And so, go ahead. Yeah.
When you get hooked into something like that, it doesn't seem like work anymore or schoolwork. It seems more play.
Yes, exactly. I would love to read the cases and just highlight all these color coded intensely. I just loved it. It just was something about it really spoke to me.
And I would say I feel like we put a lot of pressure on the young kids, teenagers to decide at 17, 18 what they're going to do for the rest of their life. And it's like, you got to try a bunch of things. And then when it clicks, it'll click for you.
That's exactly right. Like I said, I had no idea I wanted to be an attorney. And I would say really go with what clicks with you. And you may not find it right away, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Don't be discouraged just because some other person seems to have it figured out.
Yeah, I'm 35. I think I've had probably 10 jobs. I'm still trying to figure
it out, okay? But you're right, yeah.
I'd like to acknowledge Sarah Williams for being with us here today in the chat and watching. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah is also a content creator for Alabama Care, so she does broadcasts on her own. Now, you mentioned that you took a class. It was the history of the Constitution in college. Was there anything specific that popped out from the Constitution that you were like,
Yeah, so when we got to cases that are landmark U.S. Supreme Court civil rights cases, so everything from religious freedom to racial segregation, there was something about just the way that the courts were involved, and I'm not going to get any kind of political, okay, because I respect both opinions on courts being involved in social issues, but for me it was just that, wow, here's the Supreme Court. There's one case, this is not a disability case, but like Tinker something, my professor watches this, but it's about a religious freedom, okay, and so the Supreme Court saying when you can exercise like a religious type demonstration. And I just was so struck by the idea that the courts, the highest court in our land, is getting involved in certain circumstances in our social and civil rights, and particularly, I should say, protecting our freedoms, our liberties, which, circling back to disability, it means individuals with disability having a right to live their life to the fullest. So I won't go on. I'll talk more about that a little bit, but so reading the cases, when we went through the cases, that really clicked.
Yeah, so it really struck you that maybe the Supreme Court, the highest law in the land, was getting involved in some things that didn't seem like really fell on their plate.
Right, and I mean, and that's exactly how some people feel, and I respect, but they have, and they've continued to since the 1950s, especially, well, really before, but as far as protecting civil liberties since the 60s, late 50s, they have been
pretty active in that area.
So not always agreeing with civil liberties, but been active. That's a good way to put it, yeah.
I had the opportunity to sit down with Mr. Courtney Tarver, who was the Associate Commissioner of Department of Mental Health when I first got to Alabama.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And one of the things that came out of that conversation that really stuck with me is I was trying to understand the community and being new and trying to do the best for my aunt and really learn. And he said that disability rights are civil rights. And so this is still, we're still fighting some of the things that we've been fighting for the past, 50 years, stuff like that. So it really struck home, that sentence that he said to me.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned that Rhea Law kind of focuses on workplace and school environments. Why did you pick those two?
Right. So to me, both of those areas are fundamental for someone to be able to live a fully independent life. I say that both from my own personal experience and then just working with families and individuals. I'll go back into just my own personal history to give an example. I had an awesome family behind me, but I was especially from high school beyond, really throughout, was integrated, and mainstreamed, as they would say, into the classroom. And then obviously, I went to college, and I say that because I can sit here and say, I don't know what I would have done, what my life would look like now if I had not been given those opportunities, if I had not had the law there for my family to stand on, maybe when the schools weren't being cooperative, or just the fact that I had those opportunities. I had to get the education to get where I am today, okay? And even if you don't go on to college, because college isn't for everybody, right? Even people with maybe more intellectual disabilities, it doesn't just, school, I could go on and on about school, but school is our first place where we learn about society and how society works. It's like a mini version of society. I think a lot of educators would tell you that especially elementary school age.
Yeah, and you get to see how you function with other kids and figuring out the social norms.
Exactly. It's the first time you kind of, more or less go outside of your family, your immediate family, into the rest of the world. So it's so important, the messages that you receive, good or bad. So, really determine a lot of people's life path, and especially people with disabilities. And then for employment, it's very similar, because employment, it's like, it's our adult way of figuring out, where do I fit into this society that we have.
I think a lot of people sometimes identify with the school or with the employment that they have, that kind of thing. So it can mean a lot there, and it brings a lot of confidence to yourself if you're doing what you want to in school and you're doing what you want to
Yes.
in work, and it's a good fit there. And there's a lot of, push behind disability employment.
Yes.
And I did hear that throughout the pandemic, that's something that has been on the rise. With the shortage of workers, there's been other opportunities that employers are kind of getting outside and
Yes.
looking for.
Yeah, so with employment especially, it does tend to be people's identity. We are this, I do X, As far as within the pandemic, I do want to say yes, as far as employers being a little more open-minded, one thing in a lot of an employment case about disability is accommodations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one would frequently be working from home, even, so working remotely, even just part-time. And honestly, pre-pandemic, that was seen as an undue burden, what they would call an undue burden under the law. Repeatedly, it was a very common argument on the employer side of things. And now, obviously, I don't think I have to explain much. Working remotely has become the norm for everybody. And so that's been an interesting thing to watch. That's just one example.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine we probably get Zoom in the Webster's dictionary as like the word of the year.
I know, right?
Everybody knows it now.
Yeah.
But just going through that process and hearing that, what you're saying is, it reminds me of other stories where an individual needs to kind of adapt a device or anything like that, or maybe a designer's thinking about a universal accessibility.
Right.
And what they find out is that it benefits everybody that's going to come in contact with that product or with that service. And so being adaptable to individuals and what their needs are, maybe that's working from home. Some of these companies would have found that out before the pandemic.
I know.
Saved a bunch of money on office space.
I know. That's what I'm saying. And then also, all the cases, even beyond Alabama, across the nation, I guarantee you, all the individuals bringing a disability claim, the employees, that their case did not turn out for them. And it was based on this idea that working from home was an undue burden. And that kind of fights me up a little bit, right? But you're absolutely right. And I don't mean to run off here, but one thing you said was that how it can touch and affects it's better for everybody. And that's one thing about disability in general, is that, I have, my limitations are from since birth, and I know many are, but then disability is something that affects everyone.
If you can live to the ripe old age,
exactly.
Everybody. I think Dr. Graham Sisson has a saying that I heard is, you're just waiting to get to that point eventually.
Exactly, and so that was a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And we had an opportunity to be at United Ability a couple weeks ago, and they have a preschool kind of thing, which is very integrated.
Oh, awesome.
And I always said, I don't have any children of my own, but I would love for that experience for them, because I feel like it can make such a big difference. And a lot of times I feel like maybe the pushback from either individuals or organizations are just because they don't have experience. It's something new. And whenever anybody goes to something new, they can be a little bit fearful. It's just not comfortable yet. And so the earlier you can have those interactions, the more often it's better for everybody growing up in that environment.
Yeah. So. And I think to build off of what you just said, sometimes it's the emphasis I've found, like in litigation, and this just applies on life, I think, to inclusion in general. Sometimes focusing on how different the person with a disability is can backfire or can actually make it harder, because sometimes it can both in school and work, it can seem like, yeah, you are different and you're so different. I mean, I don't believe, but you're so different that it's just too much for us to try and include you. I'm saying it kind of broadly here, but that's kind of can be a hurdle.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I approach it as an attorney even, and I think it could be just, even if I wasn't being an attorney, of saying, no, yes, we do need X, Y, Z to happen, but it's really not, look, it's gonna benefit the broader group. It's really not too different that where it's really gonna shake up your entire thing you got going on here. So, I mean, and so that's one thing I think should be noted, because I think as a community, we do tend to emphasize how unique we are, which is good, because I think being unique is awesome, But as far as being inclusive, sometimes it is about, no, you know what, we're actually more alike than you think.
And using that language to get that point across.
Right. Yeah.
And the inclusion there. Now, something that you did say was knowing the law when you were younger and having self-advocacy for yourself and maybe some family advocacy there if the schools weren't cooperating. Can you talk about the importance of understanding your rights, especially at a young age?
Yeah, and so I would say, I mean, I definitely have to give huge props to my family, especially my mom. And then obviously as I got older too, high school and then college age and beyond. But knowing, you need to know just what the law says. So I'm going to give away my age a little bit. But when I was in elementary school, the Americans with Disabilities Act, of course, there were special education laws that had been in place for a couple of decades, right? But the ADA was relatively new when I was in elementary school. So it was almost like a revitalization, even though there had been other laws in place for quite a time. But anyways, it was, I think, especially important for my mom and other family members to be aware of you know what, there's this law out there, or laws, and even if you don't know the exact details of the law, but to know that you have rights. To not be afraid to say respectfully, I think that this needs to happen because it's the best for my child. So I'm thinking of like elementary and middle school age, and even high school, honestly. Families should be informed.
And that's tough because a lot of that can seem like jargon.
Yes.
And if you go through the ADA, it's not a one-page sheet.
No, oh my gosh.
It's a lot to digest, and I think it's important to have others that are aware of that and can translate it to anybody for the understanding there. But to have that ammo, to say, look, school, this is what I need, and here is the support from our government that says you guys need to provide this support for us here.
Go ahead.
I just would like to have a couple concrete examples of what a case may look like in the workplace and the school environment. So it could be like somebody's in school or in the work environment and not knowing that they have a potential case, and they're like, oh, that is a potential case.
Well, that's a great question. So for me, people, when they get to me, when they're contacting me, from the employment perspective, unfortunately, it's usually when they've been terminated. But I can go and point out for the audience some things that in hindsight, if they had known to say X, Y, Z at this time, maybe they would have never even had to get to me.
Yeah.
So a good concrete example would be, let's say that you have extreme, a lot of times there's multiple disabilities going on, right? So let's say you have extreme anxiety and then some mobility issues in your legs. I'm just going to throw that out there, okay?
Yeah.
And so you start working, you do work in an office setting, so you mainly work at a computer, doing XYZ work on the computer for 8 hours a day, 7 to 8 hours, right? And you just start to notice, though, that you really just can't sit there for too long because your legs starts hurting, and then also just sitting in one place makes you really anxious. Okay.
Yeah.
Just as an example. So a lot of times people, because they want to be a good employee, sometimes they won't say anything, but they might, I got to take a break. They start taking breaks. They don't ask for an accommodation. Maybe either because they don't know they can, or there's stigma, unfortunately, even though there's all these policies that are open. Yes, please ask for accommodation. But and so then maybe at a certain point, this is going on, you keep taking these breaks for your leg, your anxiety, okay? And maybe you do at some point go and talk to a supervisor and say, look, I'm going to need an accommodation here. You disclose what's going on, about your mobility and your anxiety. And so at that point, you're now engaging what they call an interactive process. They use that term both at work and in school. And what kind of ends up happening, though, is that the employer at that point can really see it, their story later on, right, when things go sideways, is that, but see, they had already been doing XYZ not great stuff, and it was causing a backlog on our work, okay? And so when we didn't know, because sometimes maybe they don't.
Yeah.
Okay, so just basically, and so then what ends up happening is that there's been this, bad things written up on someone's file, so to speak, and then the interactive process breaks down, and that person will get terminated. So nobody wants that to happen, right? So what I would say from employment is, you have to be careful. I don't want to say disclose every time. I don't want to say that, but it goes back to what you said a moment ago, what we were talking about with knowing your rights. And you do need to just basically kind of letting the employer know, and the school too, I know my rights. And so if you say you get hired and like maybe it's not even all the time, but I have anxiety and mobility issues. If you think that it might affect your work, maybe, just that things like I might need a break. I might need 15 minutes every 2 hours, what have you. Go ahead and tackle that at the beginning. Because you're legally protecting yourself. You have protection regardless, but that's really putting a stamp on it.
Yeah.
Okay. And in school, I don't want to take up too much time, but it's kind of basically the same thing. Knowing your rights and exercising them from the get-go, which is hard when you don't know what they are sometimes. But
I feel like a lot of that stems from knowing your rights. So you have to know your rights, and then you can kind of build upon that.
Exactly.
And as you're going through that, you were saying, maybe don't disclose everything that whatever you're comfortable with there.
Right.
But even in school and at work, it would be like, hey, school, I know that you want people to graduate your school with A's, B's, do very well, be active, go on to great universities. In order for me to do that, these are the things that I need to do to help you look good as a school.
Right.
And then also in the workplace, hey, work, I know that you want to do these things. You want to grow. You want to do this. I want you to do that as well. I'm on your team. In order for me to be the best person for you to achieve those, these are the things that I need to help you reach your goals. And so I think framing it there a little bit is a good way, instead of like, I need these or else kind of thing. And just saying like, we're a team, and if you want the best out of me, I need these things to give you guys what you want.
Yes, exactly. That's actually an excellent way to put it, and that's how, like, I'm coming at it from the back end where things have just fallen apart. But an employer, and I think schools too, but especially I can say from an employment perspective, when you approach them at the beginning, it can be more of an era of we're working together, because and whereas if you wait, or it gets down to the, oh gosh, it's really a problem now, and now I'm going to talk to you about my accommodations because there's big issues in production or what have you. The employer, unfortunately, even if it's not the case, will see it as, you're not on our side here. You're not on the team.
Yeah.
You're causing problems. It's not necessarily accurate, but it's like you said, it's
the perception of it. Yeah. And I feel like that kind of is communication.
Right.
So relationships, that kind of stuff is really good there.
Yeah.
But it all kind of builds upon having the confidence and knowing your rights.
Right.
And having that self-advocacy there.
Yeah. Which is very important.
Is really important at such a young age as well.
Yeah.
You talked about asking for accommodations. It reminded me, I have a family member that got extra time for tests in college.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
It really made a difference for her.
Yeah, it can. And so something like that, extra time for tests, that can make a huge difference. I've encountered, young people maybe college age that they could have that accommodation, and they think, but I don't want to go through all that asking, la, la, la. But then come exam time, maybe they really, really struggle. And that's kind of when it's like, oh, I need that though. I need to be exercising my rights. And that's when it becomes important to have done it at the appropriate.
Yeah. No, so this family member, she's way smarter than I am. But she focuses on trying to get everything 100%.
Yes.
All the time.
I can relate to that.
And it takes her a little bit longer. But you ask her anything, she'll blow me out of the water.
Yeah, exactly.
So you need to ask for those accommodations there. I have a question. Alabama is a right to work state. So how does that work?
So, yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, because I get asked that all the time. Yes, Alabama is a right to work state, meaning, your employer can fire you for any reason or no reason at all. But that is Alabama state law, okay? what we've been referencing today are federal laws.
Which override.
Exactly. So, there's exactly these laws override the right to work. It's not all across the board, but when it comes to discrimination, whether it's disability and then other things like gender, race, etc. But as far as your rights as an individual with disability, the federal laws are what control. Okay, not the Alabama's right to work. Now, I'm going to try to make a middle road. It doesn't mean, we were talking about how being coming together here, it's not like a, blank card for just getting anything you want, but it is a protection. Don't think that because Alabama's a right to work state that you don't have protection.
Because I've heard that right to work before, and then you were saying, a lot of the times when you take on cases, it's because the individual has been fired or dismissed.
Yeah.
And then I've thought, what would the company say? They're going to say it's a right to work state, but then you come back with, this is.
Yeah, usually the employer's not saying
it's a right.
It's because of your disability.
Yeah.
There will be maybe some other things going on around the time of the termination that I, as a lawyer, point to that say, oh yeah, but it was about their disability.
Yeah.
But no, they don't usually. Sometimes, but it's rare, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of times it might just be, it might be a reference to other things that kind of at first don't really seem to be disability related, or it could just be nothing at all.
Yeah.
Just come in my office. I'm sorry, it's not working out. Goodbye.
And when you say it could kind of be disability related, or maybe it's not, that reminds me of something that you were talking about, of anxiety, those kinds of things. And those are kind of the hidden disabilities that I'm hearing more and more about.
Yes.
Are you seeing more cases in reference to those recently?
Yes. I think that we should remember that disability does include what we call hidden disabilities. So any kind of, mental health issue, intellectual, developmental, I don't want to misuse a term, so I won't, things that aren't they aren't apparent. And that's, again, ties back to how we are all affected by disability. I can't throw out exact statistics, but I know the pandemic has increased levels of mental health issues to the point that are disabling for people.
Yeah.
So yes, we have seen a rise in general in employment related, and I imagine in school too. I've seen it a lot in employment that are more those internal issues.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're starting to hear about that more and more as we're kind of coming out of the pandemic, especially on the younger generation, of how it's, the isolation's kind of affecting there.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So I have dyslexia, and so I always, especially when it comes to numbers, I'm horrible with numbers.
Yeah.
But the isolation, I'm very outgoing, like to being around people, and I did not like not going and talking with individuals or playing hockey, that kind of stuff. And it takes a toll on your overall well-being. So when you talk about, as a lawyer, taking a case, who are the people that you're taking the case against, and what's kind of the pushback from them? So
the people that I'm going against usually are either a school board. It's usually it's the school, so it would be like elementary school, middle school, high school, but really it's the school board. Okay, so that's in the education context. Or if it's higher education, then it would be like just that university or college. And then in the employment, it's a company, and that can range. It does have to be of a certain size, so more of a mid-size or larger. Mm-hmm. So
50, I think.
Yeah. Well, for the ADA, it might be 50. I thought it was 14, I believe.
Okay. All right.
But still, I usually see it's like 50 is a good number or higher of the amount of employees. So an employer that's not just your mom and pop. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the pushback is, it's like the right to work thing. It's, we are a business and we have a right to run our business how we want. It's about the bottom line. It's not personal. It wasn't anything about this person as an individual and their characteristics. It was about, we have to have X amount of production by Fridays, and that wasn't happening with this person. Okay. Mm-hmm. That is usually kind of the general pushback is, we have a right as a business to run things as we see fit.
So in that sense, it kind of boils down to money. I feel like that's
You
when you say
know,
bottom line there.
Yeah, and that's really one hard thing for me, because in every single one of my cases, as in employment especially, where and I get it because I'm representing these employees, and I get that side of it, that it's about like no, the discrimination, but when we get into whether it's trying to come to some kind of agreement or even all the way to full blown in court, money is keeps kind of coming back to money. And I'm not saying that all employers or defense attorneys they're human beings too. That's important to remember. But I think it's also important for those of us on the side of like employees, individual rights, civil disability rights, to remember that things do cost money, and
But
I don't think you should use it as an excuse. Okay, and I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
But I think it can be disheartening sometimes for people to realize, like, wait, why are we talking? Is this really about numbers? Is this really like it's getting down to numbers here? And why do we just keep talking about money? What about the justice part? And I agree with that. Just that sentiment. I agree. I think it should be about the rights, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
the employer may not be thinking coming from that
no,
stance.
and they probably won't be.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean individually, like as the individuals within a company, they may not have their own kind of, but, yeah, a lot of times it is more of an economic thing. And, I would want to say, and I try and, like, before things get bad, okay, so before maybe someone gets terminated and they have to call somebody like me, that kind of also should be make and aware that sometimes it's not, it could still be discrimination. So I do want to point that out. But as far as it's not personal, I guess is what I want to say. That doesn't make it right. I think that cost can be used as an excuse, like, oh, it's a financial burden, when it's not really.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that like sometimes it can just, the fact that you feel personally attacked, I've heard that, and I've experienced that just in general, like throughout life. I mean, if you have a disability, especially a physical, very visible one, you know what I'm talking about. It can feel very personal, and sometimes it's not. It's still maybe against the law, but it's not that kind of personal. I hope that makes sense. But
yeah, and so I feel like it would make me want to say, if they did go the economic route, say, well, we're by having me on your team, we're going to do better than it would cost you as a company to have me on the team. Mm-hmm. And that reminds me of one of the owners of Taziki's Mediterranean restaurant, who hires a number of individuals with disability in each of their stores here in Alabama.
Yes.
And what he was saying is just
he's awesome. By the way. Yeah.
He's really Keith Richards.
Yes.
Shout out to him.
Yeah. Shout out to Keith.
I think he was our 4th or 5th broadcast when we first started.
Yeah.
And he said, the turnaround for everybody at that store and the atmosphere made customers want to come back, economic sense there. And he said it totally changed, the store's environment. Yeah. It went from more of a business to a family.
Yeah.
And so that was really powerful to hear that. And then a question I have for you is, do you notice that most cases come from the first hire of an individual with a disability? Because I feel like once someone gets through and breaks that barrier for the company, and the company sees the potential and the great things that are going on,
right,
they're more likely to have others on and not have the discrimination there.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I can't put some firm yes behind that, but I will say that, okay, let me just say this. They may not really be the first time that someone ever who has extreme anxiety has ever worked for them, but it probably is one of the first times they're made aware of it.
Yeah.
And I think you're right in that it's that first encounter with, oh, you want to work. Number one, you want to work, but you need just a little bit of a modification, accommodation. And we're just now really the past few decades are just now actually doing that and pushing for it. A lot of it is, like you said, is just breaking down that barrier. Who knows? I mean, I would hope that, I'd have people like me would be out of a job. I mean, I hate to say that, but in the sense of that we wouldn't need to have lawyers coming in back on the back end going, this is what y'all did wrong and you XYZ, right?
Yep.
It would be better to be inclusive from the get-go, but we're not there yet. I mean, it's, yeah.
I think that we've made a lot of leaps
We
and
have.
bounds.
I
And
don't want to be all negative.
I'm still new to the community, but from
Yeah.
what I read, and just kind of the language in the community that I'm hearing, it seems like we've made great leaps and bounds.
Yes. From
I'm very, I love the leadership that we have here in Alabama.
Yes,
I think
we do.
we have some great leaders here.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to Alabama kind of being spotlighted as the other states going, hey, what are you guys doing down there?
Yeah,
It's really
'cause-
working.
Yeah, no, and I know I'm sounding so negative, but we do have a lot of really great things going on. And I think we seem to have a lot of real inclusion of people with disabilities and their families in the process, which is important, I think.
Yeah, the decision making. And
Right.
we have the World Games coming up. I
I
think
know.
this is the first World Games where there's an accessible sport being added to it.
I heard that yet.
Yeah, I don't know what game it is, but I don't know if it's
Can't
murder
remember
ball.
either.
It might be rugby. I think it might be wheelchair
Okay.
rugby.
But that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're doing cool things.
Yeah.
Now we've talked about some of the cases. What are some success stories? I know you mentioned that, if you come to an agreement or those types of things, what would a success story look like if someone reaches out to you and you take the case?
Well, from a school perspective, because I think that's an even better way to show, like in the school environment, it would be a student, no matter where they are in their education, elementary or even, associate, technical, whatever, them being able to continue their program, get the accommodations they need, and it not be too much of a thing to where it just sidetracks their entire path. Because, that's the worst case scenario that can happen, is that people get not in their they kicked out of the program, etc. So, and a success story is for me is when I've been able to, either with the parent or if they're old enough with the student, be able to help them navigate before a lawsuit is filed, especially in education, navigate and come to some kind of integration and accommodation to where they are able to participate and grow as a person. In an employment context, I mean, aside from some kind of after leaving the employer resolution, I would like more of these. I don't know how to, but a success story for me would be like not having to go to court. It would be able to just navigate getting an accommodation and the employee keeping their job and being able to thrive in their job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly why. There's probably a lot of factors why those aren't the cases that end up on my desk. And I don't think it's just me. I think it's just in a general employment thing. But
So most cases that end up on your desk are after
they're
the
after
employee
the
is
fact.
left.
But I mean, I will say I am open as an attorney to getting those calls. I can't speak for everybody, but I personally am open to getting calls that are about I haven't been fired. I'm not being threatened of being fired, but I'm really struggling with this accommodation process, or how should I frame it, or what are my rights before I request anything. I would love to get that call and help. I've received some, but I think it goes back to just people not knowing that they can. And also ooh, do I want to pull an attorney in right now? And so, but I always, in those instances where I've done that, I've always tried to maintain not a super adversarial, at that point, not be super, I'm going to come and get you unless it's needed. But if it's, it's all case specific. It's all depends on the person, what's really going on. But to me, that would be the real success. I mean, I know that means no litigation for my other fellow attorneys, but that would be the goal. That would be what would be amazing.
Mm-hmm. Have it a seamless flow there. Now, if you get a call like that, are there organizations that you will refer to, or?
Yeah. So, ADAP, Alabama Disability Advocacy Program.
Mm-hmm. Shout out, Mr. Tucker.
That's right. They're an amazing organization. I know that they are great. I mean, they're really great. So they're one that I would definitely say you should go check them out.
Even when you were talking about the work environment and
Yeah.
accommodations, it made me think of ADRS and
Yes,
how there are.
No, Vokery ADRS is awesome, and especially with helping navigate, working with a voc rehab counselor. I know it helped me a lot and is out there. But sometimes people, I'll just be, they are well past, well, first of all, those programs, I will say this, ADRS, I believe, is you could be in your mid-30s, never been plugged into it, but if you went to them, I do believe that if you go through the right steps, you can jump on board.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
I think at any age.
Yes, you can. And I say that because, I, personally did it through high school, through college. I connected as a minor, right? But I think some people's perception is that it has to be that way, that you have to have connected through school. But I don't think so. So if you are a worker and you need to reach out to ADRS, vocational rehab, for sure. And those are free, those are services that are provided, like they're for you out there,
Yeah, and they're a huge organization.
Yes.
They're throughout the state.
Yeah.
So no matter where you are, they can help there.
Exactly so.
Yeah, when you were talking about the work environment there, I was like, I wonder if she's like, if you need some adaptive equipment, ADRS is your
Yes,
go-to.
like exactly. There might be some things that in that situation where if they contact me for the legal part, but I know that, you might need XYZ, I'm not in the position to do that. I would definitely send them that way of ADRS.
Now you mentioned that sometimes you'll go to court. How often do you go to? Because that's scary for me.
Oh, see, that's actually what I mainly do.
Okay.
I mainly do cases where I'm filing lawsuits. And it's just most of the time those lawsuits are when people in the employment context have been terminated. And that comes down to just the law and damages and that kind of thing. You can file lawsuits without someone being terminated, but I won't go down the rabbit hole trying to explain that. But a lot of times I'm in court, and that's actually most of what I do is being in court. I love it. I can tell you, yes.
I see it on TV and I'm like, oh my gosh, I would get eaten alive there.
But it's a scary thing. I'm doing it it's my profession. And so it's like, doctors are amazing. Definitely not comparing myself to a doctor, but it's kind of like, I would think kind of like when a surgeon is like going into surgery, this is what I do. This is what I've been trained to do. So of course I'm nervous in other ways, but my clients are nervous in a different way. It's scary for them. And part of my job, I feel like, is also to be aware of that, which is more of almost a counseling,
mentor.
Right, that's a big part of it, especially if you work with just individuals, you're representing individuals or their families. It's very one-on-one, which I really love a lot. But yeah, I'm in court. That's mainly what I'm doing is in court.
So how many cases have you had in any given time frame that you like to reference? Either a year or since you began?
Oh gosh, like the number. It's been, I don't have over, I don't even know, I don't want to say my exact caseload, but I have several dozen cases going on at once.
Currently.
Active cases, yeah.
And majority of those will end up going into court.
Yeah, they're in court and at some stage of the process, okay? And so it doesn't all look Perry Mason the whole time. Actually, unfortunately, I kind of wish it was more like that. I'm just kidding.
I always think
but it can be at different stages. So some it's I just filed that lawsuit.
And some are kind of coming to an end.
The reason why I struggle to say, this X number is because every attorney is different. And I do like to try and maintain a focus on quality too, because I really want to make sure I'm giving attention to every single client. And that does make you, I am selective about the number of cases I have because I want to make sure that I'm giving my full attention. And I think any attorney that's what I've learned from mentors and just through trial and error too, right? Is that I want to be able to take the cases that it might require a lot of hours or work and digging, but I love to solve puzzles and dig. So for me, that's how I like to work. So, I have a lot of cases, but then at the same time, I take cases that I really, I'm very passionate about. I guess you could say, sold, on the person's story.
Yeah, and that makes sure that you put in your best if you're
exactly.
If you believe in it.
Yeah, exactly. I want to be able to give. I'm not one that I don't take cases and file them thinking, open to say some kind of settlement. Yes, but I don't file cases thinking we're just gonna go and settle. if I'm filing a case, I want to advocate for him until it becomes obvious and reasonable to do otherwise.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that because you want to do good work, and it's a relationship.
Right.
You're creating
That's
a relationship
exactly.
there. Now you mentioned Voc Rehab was something that you took advantage of.
Yeah.
What are some success stories of self and family advocacy from your upbringing?
Oh, yes. So yes, Voc Rehab was really amazing. It helped me. I learned how to drive. I got the adaptive equipment, and that whole entire program is amazing. But also, even before that, in college, I had my counselor was helped pay for, help offset and with some get the tools I needed. It's really the best way to put it, to be able to live on campus when I was there at Birmingham Southern undergrad. And so that helped me be involved. It was, Birmingham Southern is a small liberal arts school, so being a part of the community is even more important, right? I mean, it's important at any school. And so assistive technology is another big one, not just my car, but then like a dictation system in my computer, a desk. I have a desk goes up and down. So Voc Rehab was very, very key in helping me get the tools that I needed especially like from high school, college, law school, and then into just coming out of law school, because I went straight through. So
yeah, that's a lot of school.
Oh my gosh,
back to back. We have McCartney Hagar, who's also an independent contractor with Alabama Care, so she does her own broadcast.
Yeah.
She is a freshman at UAB,
yeah.
and we met through ADRS
Cool,
and some of the services there. And
Yeah.
she was just speaking on, did a broadcast on accessibility in the airlines and the number of chairs that will get damaged or lost.
I believe it.
Stuff like that. So she's bringing to light a lot of cool things.
Wow. Yeah.
I'm excited for her to continue
That's
growing
cool.
in school. But she was kind of talking about how
Yeah.
ADRS helped navigate that, and
Yeah.
getting connected to UAB services and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
it's very important to do.
Yes.
You have a quote on your website, and this may go back to something you said earlier. You said your case shouldn't be a bigger disability than your disability. What does that mean?
So, I just thinking about that when I started my firm, sometimes, things can take it's like they take on a life of their own. What becomes, a mountain into like a molehill, is that what,
In a mound or something?
yeah, like it becomes like a grain of salt turns into a huge mountain, okay?
Oh, yeah.
Of just, but could have been a small issue, could just get out of proportion. And also I think internally, individuals with disability, I say that's for myself, can sometimes feel like if they're encountering something like discrimination at school or work, that this is such a huge problem. And how am I going to get through this? And I guess I would say, and I told myself, well, yeah, but you have overcome so much just with your own being you, not to, and I don't want to glorify it in a way that's kind of, there should be over inspirational, because that's a whole other story. I think people with disabilities can be inspirational, whatever, and I think we're people, right? But I say this to say, if you are able to get through what you've gotten through as a person with whatever limitations you might have, internal or external, then what you're facing at school or work, you got it. You can do it. That's really what I was thinking, really for myself and for others. I mean, and it's true. It can feel like in the process, even for me as an attorney, that this problem here, whatever, say, it's an accommodation at school or work, is so big and so impossible to overcome. And just remember that it's not, okay? I mean, because other people around in the situation might have that attitude like it is.
It kind of reminds me of like coming into challenges earlier in life.
Yes.
And overcoming those kind of sharpens and fine tunes your tools.
It does.
And so you kind of have a leg up on hard work and determination, as opposed to maybe some of your peers that haven't experienced those challenges at that point in their life. So it's.
I think so. I mean, I think whether it's physical or internal, when you have them from a young age, whether you realize it or not, you become very creative, come up with lots of solutions. You just do. And you don't realize it until sometimes,
Yeah. And you make these
Yeah.
models that help you navigate
Exactly.
either school
Yeah.
or work or whatever, that relationships. But you figure that out when you're young. And so it kind of helps in a way, and it gives a little bit of confidence.
It does. See, and that is a strength, for all, I feel like there's so much emphasis on the different, how people with disabilities are different, and it's like this negative tone to it. But that's a strength.
Yeah.
That if you have any kind of limitation, you do have a one-up. I mean, on others in perseverance, creativity, and like I said, you may not even realize it. So, I mean, I was very shy when in middle school age and high school. So
I do not believe that.
I know,
You're
right?
very.
I'm like, no. But I was though. And that's why I say you may not even realize it, because I didn't really realize it. I was so shy. I didn't realize that. You know what? You're pretty, creative, and like your uniqueness and the way you're different. It's not just negative. It's actually to your advantage.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
No,
I
and I think that's true. I mean, I think anybody with limitations have gotten through a lot that some people
are just coasting. Didn't have those those challenges.
Right, and you figured it out.
Yeah, it's like
whatever
adversity.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like that mentality.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about, somebody may be thinking that they are being discriminated against at school or at work. And maybe they have read their rights and they have some understanding of their rights, and they're thinking that they need to contact a lawyer, but they may hold back thinking, I can't do that. It's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
I've heard it's, this and that. So they kind of might be fearful to pick up the phone and make that first call. What would you say to somebody there? And if you could kind of ballpark, tell them they're not going to have to sell the house or something like that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because look, I mean, it's true. I mean, lawyers, and it's expensive. So in that situation, I would say, there are great organizations like ADAP, for instance, that don't cost, and so they would be a frontline resource. I don't know if I think, as far as resource, but as far as private attorneys, okay, many will talk to you. I will. At no cost for an hour, right? And personally, I try and find the most minimal cost solution, even if that means I'm only going to make X. I'll be able to put in X amount of hours, so I'll get X amount of money. I mean, I hate to talk about the money and the numbers here, but it's a reality. So that's how I do it. So I will, if I think, okay, well, maybe we could try and have a meeting, and so I would give some kind of estimate of it'll take this number of hours, and which would be roughly X amount, right? So, which is, for me, wouldn't be thousands and thousands and thousands, right? For something that's okay, if we just tackle it in this specific way. I guess what I'm trying to say is, outside of filing a lawsuit, in that before stages, right, where you're just trying to figure out what do I need to do, I think that, I'm open, and I'm sure some others are too, to doing something that's more in line with someone's actual ability to pay.
It's case by case then.
It's case by case. So that's why I can't throw out a number.
Yeah.
That would be awesome, but then at the same time, it is so case specific and what someone needs.
Are there resources other than ADAP where there are opportunities for scholarships or something that would help offset some of the legal? You ever heard?
I don't know. That's actually a good question. I
don't
honestly don't know that off the top of my head, but you're making me want to figure that out.
I don't know if there is either, but you said the first hour, it's just a conversation. So don't ever be fearful to pick up that phone and just learn.
Right, exactly. So yes, the consultation is, at that point, I'm or any other attorney is not officially the person's attorney, but it's just really just having a conversation with them, trying to figure out what's going on and giving some kind of advice. Legal aid, legal services. There's organizations within every city. They may be another program that you could kind of filter through, I guess, go through them and then maybe say, I want to use this attorney, volunteer lawyer. There's a lot of volunteer lawyers program. I mean, if you just Google your county and volunteer lawyers program, I can't speak. I know all of those organizations, though, they have their own boards. They have their own separate. They're not like ADRS where it's like through the state. It's very local. So you really kind of would have to see their feel on it, but that would be another option.
Yeah. And that's something that can come up in discussion if
Right.
it's just
I mean,
not a right fit.
like, yeah, I mean, I mean, it's so case specific, but if I'm talking to someone and, you know, it's getting close to like, I can't talk to them all day, right? But I know that they might need XYZ help. And it seems like, I mean, I always will ask, I'm very upfront at some point in the conversation. I'll be like, listen, you know, what is your financial ability? I'll say it some way like that, because I don't personally want to put any family in a situation where it's like, oh, wait, we're using your services and then we're getting this XY. No, you know.
Yeah. You don't want to put somebody in a situation where we want a case, or do we want bread on the table? Exactly.
No, I don't think anybody, that shouldn't be
anything.
I think, and it doesn't have to be. I guess it's like within that hour. And I mean, or, you know, I would be willing to try and help someone figure it out.
Yeah.
You know.
I'd like to ask you, if everybody knew one law or one act here in Alabama, what would that be that they would act on? So is there one specific act or rule or law that you like, I wish everybody is in middle school, they learned this in 5th grade or 6th grade, or family?
I'm trying to think. So honestly, I think it's something we've already mentioned, but that whole right to work thing with, which is true. Okay, Alabama being in right to work, knowing that there's this thing called the Americans with Disabilities Act, and there is Title II. You don't even have to remember Title II, okay? But which is the employment aspect of it. It's the whole part of the law that deals with employment, overrides the right to work. That really honestly would be, I wish more people knew that.
Yeah, because I feel like when people hear the right to work, they feel like, oh, well, the company can do whatever they want.
Right, they don't have to, they don't, not, and it kind of gets morphed into not just termination, but it becomes just, they can do whatever they want. It's not just like about firing, it's just they get to run their company however they want, no matter what. Mm-hmm. And that's not true. That's not true. The law says that's not true.
They fall under the state, United States of America.
Right. It's not just Alabama laws they fall under. They also follow under federal law, and they have for several decades now. So it's not even a new thing. It's
getting everybody up to speed.
It's more like getting the community on board.
Yeah.
That's one thing people should know.
What would you say to parents of a child with a disability?
That, you know, I have family members who are teachers. So I do like teachers. I love teachers. So I want to say that before I say this, but to the families, don't be afraid to question a recommendation. Mm-hmm. I think there should be a healthy level of trust in educators for sure. I don't think that all educators, I think there are amazing educators out there who want to do the right thing. A lot of times they do want to do the right thing. But, you know, don't be afraid to question, but also remember that it's a balance, I would say, for a family. Sometimes I can see situations where it gets the parent, like there's no meeting of the minds at all, unfortunately, because
everyone's kind of in a standoff.
Yeah, well, it's like, you know, everybody on the school versus the family. It gets to that point, which is unfortunate because it might have started to where we're all in this together. And there's kind of, that goes more into communication and not necessarily even the law. But I think what worries me the most is when I see people rely just solely on, well, that's the recommendation that the school's given, and it might be the best thing. You know, like I said, you can't discount educators and the training they've had, okay? But don't be afraid to just respectfully say, I'd like a second opinion, mm-hmm. or because the law offers you things like that, second opinions.
I've heard that used. Parents say that also with doctors when their child is young. Yes. And speaking up at that point, like, well, I don't know if that's the best thing for my son or my daughter.
Exactly.
But having that advocacy to stand your ground, and I heard it really came down to your baby better than the doctors do,
Yeah, exactly.
kind of thing. They might have the clinical blood test stuff, but you know how your son or daughter is at home over the night. They don't see that.
Yeah.
And so you have to have good communication and say, no, this is what I'm seeing,
Yeah.
and give that feedback there. I get a lot of individual or parents that will call and say, my son or my daughter is transitioning out of the traditional school system, and looking either for work or, whatever that looks like, long-term living. What would you, and it's a struggle there, that transition period.
Yeah. So, we're thinking the same. So, I don't know. I think I know what you're going to want me to talk about here is, well, the transition and kind of.
I get a lot of parents that say like, well, how do I navigate that?
Right. Yeah. I was like, we're on the same page. Yeah. I'm doing the same thing here. Yeah.
So what would you say to parents?
So, and this is coming also from my own personal place too of, and it kind of goes back to the school part of it. Okay, back when they're in K through 12 school. So, and why it's like important to say, I know my baby best, but also remember that at some point this person's going to be, your child's going to be transitioning out to society. And I mean, I know that I personally just wanted to be like everybody else. And to an extent that's not going to be true, which is not a bad thing, right? Because I have limitations.
Well, you're unique.
Exactly.
And
Everybody's
each person.
unique. I mean, it's not just people with disabilities, but I think the transition, this in a broad sense, when I've thought about it for myself and then just kind of seeing the community, like just my own observations personally, it seems sometimes that, like there can be such even by families and friends of this is the special, unique person. And that can have a backfire. It can make you as a person with an individual, a person with a disability, I'm saying this more maybe from a personal place, feel more ostracized. You know, and I think sometimes I've seen just personally here, not as an attorney actually, but just personally, where it's like there's a good heart coming from maybe family and friends.
Yeah.
But over time, I'm talking about something that's probably, over time that they're special. When they get to that transition point, and this is very broad observation, but that can be an underlying thing that's like, this person's been called special and singled out so much growing up. And not just by like people in a bad way, but just also maybe in a very loving way, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
From a very, very loving place.
But
part about being in society is, we are all unique, right? We all have different shades of everything and we're all great, and which is awesome. But there is also part of being part of the collective, being a part of the group. And I just know internally, if you feel like you're different, even if it's a good different, but you're different, I guess you have to remember people with disabilities also, there's a lot of physical, like you are in this classroom over here. There's a lot of physical separation, even with intellectual disabilities.
Yeah.
And so psychologically, I'm not a psychologist, but that to me is a big part. I know I'm getting kind of deep here, but remember, I guess, as a family that your child, you want them to be a part of society. And I think obviously every parent does, they want them to feel loved and have friends and, do what they want to do and grow and thrive like everybody, right? Well, being like everybody means that sometimes they are part of the group and they're not unique. I don't know how else to put it. I hope I've conveyed it in a way. And I think, for me, I know that personally, like my family has always been more, I've struggled with what I'm talking about too myself, but I've also had some influence of like not being treated different when I didn't need to be. Okay. Like when it was like
overcompensation.
Right. Like, or letting me like slack. Because, people, families with disabilities, you might know what I'm talking about. Like, if I can do a chore and I'm physically capable of doing it, for instance, not saying I can't do it because I'm disabled but actually there's a way you could do your chores.
Yeah. So
That's what I'm talking about.
not being pushed as much. I won't say
Sometimes, well, I mean,
but like you could do better that, and sometimes
and
we
that's
need that.
expectation.
Expectations is what I was
Thank you.
looking
Yeah,
for.
I just love it. Yeah, you know what? I wish I had started with that word. That's what I'm talking about, is expectations. And I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't just start, it's not just expectations from school officials and employers. It's within your family too.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to sound like I'm trashing families, because I don't think, again, I really think everything is from a loving place. I really do. But sometimes what I see
Is
both
it
within myself and then just from others, if there's a client, whatever, it's just that it's more of the mindset.
Yeah, it's a limiting beliefs that you're putting on others.
Exactly, which is part of that society too, okay? You
Yeah.
can't just blame it on, I don't want to just blame it on like XYZ parent, you know? But it's changing the way we think about, like, yeah, we're all different, but different in a way that helps all of us grow, not different in the way that is inhibiting.
Sometimes I'll see,
I don't know if that was a long-winded
that was
answer.
perfect. Sometimes I'll see like a helicopter parent where they're not allowing their child to. There was a quote I saw one time. It said, "It's very important when your child is learning to do dangerous things. You cannot like intercede there. They have to do that. Whether that's crossing like a little stream with rocks on it, and it may be slippery. You can't say no, don't do that, and pick them up. You have to let them explore." So they kind of see what that looks like and learn and grow that way. But then the other end is like, as a parent, you're probably not always going to be there for your child. There's going to be a time when you're not there, and they need the skills to navigate their life and what they want without you being there and telling everybody, well, they're special or whatever that looks like for as a parent.
Exactly. And look, I'm not a parent, so I don't even want to start to say that I know all about parenting, because I do not. But I know I am speaking though from being that child, and I'm not even talking about my parent, but just in general. The messages that you receive as a person with a disability, as far as like, you have to go sit over here, or oh no, you're on a special track, or I think, and maybe this is something that's like beyond the way we frame that, I think. The way we frame that to people growing up, the way it's framed, because I know for me that was one thing that I've had to overcome, and it's because that message was received on lots of different fronts, okay? Like it was more, that's why it's like a broader thing, right?
It's like the system was set
up.
It's
a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Right, where it's like, we need to shift that to not like inhibiting, but more, how are you, like, you're more persevering, you're more creative. Like, yeah, we're going to do things a little differently for you, but this is how awesome, this is the way it's awesome. Having that, even just having that attitude about it, when it comes down to say, like, to circle back to your transition time, I think if that in general, that attitude has been fostered with a child, like since someone was a child growing up through school, of more, yeah, things are different, but look how awesome it is, and look how much you can participate with everyone else, versus the overall general attitude of, okay, this is overall more negative, okay?
Yeah, this is the track that people
right, you got to go do this other special track, and it's different, so different, and it's so it's not with everybody else, and more emphasis on how it's not like everybody else.
Using more
and the negative, and I say not, I want to emphasize not like in that negative way. And like at transition time, it's not like, it's a new chapter. It is a new chapter with new struggles. And there's always time to change and grow. So maybe someone's, the past is the past, right? But so start now. I mean, you can always reframe your mindset at any point. It's not doomed for anybody, you know, but that is part of it. It does start in your mindset.
Yeah. We're different people than we were when we walked in the door.
Exactly. So I don't want to
get the books, get the audio,
here.
If you want to speak to somebody, but you can change that mentality there.
Exactly.
I'd like to talk about, Birmingham Southern, your alum. Has awarded you the 2019 People Who Are Changing Birmingham Award. So
I was so humbled by that. I mean, they reached out and said, I was like, wow. So BSC was a really amazing experience, and for me, and And I did get support through programs like ADRS to be able to do that, where I lived on campus and I was involved in organizations. I was on student government, which I was not like in high school. I mean, I was shy.
You kind of blossomed in college.
I blossomed, but I lived on campus. I had, home health. I don't mind, home health aides come in, which was something that ADRS helped me coordinate and that kind of thing, which is why it's important to get plugged into not just ADRS, but services.
Yep.
But Birmingham Southern, I think, I don't know why they chose me exactly. I mean, you can read the article. I was so flattered, but I think, I will say this, and I think it's not to do with Birmingham Southern specifically, but because there have been people with very obvious physical limitations that have gone to school there. And it's really, I think this is higher education in general, but we're not the norm. I say we, as in those very obvious physical limitations, not the norm within higher education. I don't want to apply that super broadly because my experience is limited, but I think, I know there was nobody else in my graduating class that had a very obvious, physical limitation like I did. Mm-hmm. I had probably the most limited, I had limiting disability. I don't know. I was the only one that had any kind of obvious physical limitation. That wasn't just from I broke my leg or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But then at the same time, felt like I was part of the community.
Well, you were a student leader there.
I was. And I remember being very flattered that my peers elected me. I ran for SGA, right? They hold freshman elections right at the beginning of the year, right during orientation.
Nobody knows anybody.
You don't really know anybody unless you the few people maybe that came from your high school or something, but no. My peers elected me. It was so cool. I could still remember being elected and thinking, oh my gosh.
That's amazing.
And that just really did set the tone for my experience there of it. I lived on campus, went and ate in the cafeteria with everybody else. I still did some things differently because I needed to in order to navigate life. I
feel like, for your peers to see you in those leadership roles was really important for them and for the school there.
I think so. It's hard for me to speak, right? Because I'm coming from but I think that really did. I didn't realize it. I definitely didn't realize it at the time. Yeah. But for me, someone like me, that when I walk into a room, because I have a little bit of a different walk, right? And I sat at a special desk, a desk that was maybe a little different because it was easier for me to sit at. Those kind of things, my physical presence there, it impacted them in a positive way. Yeah. But in a way that, right. And
succeed in life.
Yeah. And so, but I wasn't, I'll just be honest, I really wasn't aware of it. I was just bebopping around thinking, oh gosh, being a normal college kid in many other ways. Okay. But I was very flattered that
I did student government sophomore year of college.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it helps you get involved.
That was very empowering for me as a person in general, but I think also as a person with a disability, because I felt like I was sitting around at the round table in SGA room. I was part of the leadership. And so that's why it's important, academics aside, for people to get plugged in whatever way. If you have with limitations, internal or external disability, doesn't matter, because that's part of the transition too. Yeah. That's actually, it goes back to the transition. That helped me transition, getting involved in, I joined Greek life, but even if I hadn't done that, I got into SGA, I became involved in several organizations.
Yeah, you have to be involved in society to.
Yes, and that's going back into just being involved, right?
Yeah. I think it's important to be involved in different aspects of your local community.
Yeah, and be brave. And not everybody, you will still encounter people who don't get it or don't understand whatever, your limitation, but just be brave. It'll help you in the end.
Yes. And you'll have more fun.
Oh yeah, it was fun. It was great.
So what are the future plans for Rhea Law?
So, well, I really want to, we've kind of touched on some in general of the focus of mine is really going to be trying to expand more of just giving people knowledge of their legal rights. So maybe more of a, not, I mean, consulting sort of, just
Yeah.
more, I enjoy litigation. I do like going to court, but I also really want to make sure that I'm addressing the real needs of the community and not just Ashley likes going to court because that's not always the best solution. So the future for Ray Law, one big thing for me going forward is just awareness. And we're lucky to live in an age that is very digital, social media. I think I'm a graphic artist. I'm not, but I think I'm a designer in my head. So I get into it. And so that's where I'm, as far as like, I want to definitely grow my platform as far as informing people of their rights and making it a little more easy, maybe cost effective, like small flat rate type things. I don't have everything worked out yet, but that's on the horizon for me.
Yeah.
It's to make it more of a just, not just, okay, come to me and we'll go to court.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
No, that sounds amazing. Getting the word out and
Yeah.
educating
Yeah,
and
because
informing the community.
Yeah, and because I don't work, I'm not funded by any, I'm a private person, okay? I'm a private attorney, so sometimes I can say things that maybe other people can't.
Yeah.
I don't have a conflict of interest sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to be be one of those voices out there that are just speaking to, this is the law from just a private citizen's perspective, really.
Yeah, and not having some of the filters maybe others
Exactly,
have. Giving it to you raw is like.
I mean, I will obviously go by with exactly like with the Alabama bar and be respectful, but I don't have a lot of the filters.
Yeah.
That others that work within other agencies or organizations, they do, just by nature of.
I'd be interested in learning more later about some of those ideas you have for educating. That sounds very on par with what Alabama Care likes to do.
Figuring that out. Yeah.
So
We'll
I'd like to have that conversation.
yes, we should. Yeah.
Are there any upcoming events that you would recommend individuals or families attend, whether it's virtual or in person, coming up here in Alabama?
Oh, I honestly don't know any off the top of my head. I wish I did. I would say, your programming is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I'm really, I would just say that any kind of information, so we're getting into, especially from education, we're in the second part of the year, going up to graduation, even if someone's not at the full actual transition point, just be on the lookout for events because they're out there like being held. They're probably held virtually now. A lot of them by ADRS or you're counseling off of just things like that.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to attend, even if on the face of it you're like, well, I know what the IDEA is, right? IEP, I get that, I get it, but you never,
You might pick up something new, or you might meet somebody
exactly. New. So I don't know any specific event, but I would say just
stay involved.
Stay involved, right?
Yeah. And as we come to a close here, I always like to ask, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think an individual or a family member could benefit from hearing?
I think that I would really want people to know that, it is possible to live a thriving life where you feel, good. Life is hard, but life is great too. And I think that this is a cultural thing, but it starts with each and every one of us in our own hearts and minds that disability does not mean equal, not full life for somebody. That is just the ultimate thing that I want people to know.
It's possible.
It's possible. It is completely possible. Don't listen to as they say, don't listen to the haters.
Yeah.
Okay? All right?
You'll always have haters, but they're usually cheering from the stands when you're on the field.
Exactly. So.
Well, Mrs. Ray, I really appreciate you spending the morning with us here today and telling us about everything that you do.
Thanks.
So, and we'll talk a little bit off screen about some future possibilities. I'd love to hear what's going on.
That would be great.
Well, at this time, we'll kind of look in our respective cameras and we'll say, see you guys next week. And Clifton will take us out and we will